There's a lot of research on what we call the food, water, energy nexus. It's the interdependable relationship and the positive relationship between those three sectors. These are sectors that impact our life. These are sectors that contribute to today's issues like climate change. Those are issues that we see at the forefront of policy, of innovation. And so we'll talk a little bit today about the nexus between those three sectors, look at them at a global level, and then we'll narrow down the discussion and focus on the water energy nexus. It happens to be a strong one. And then we'll bring the discussion down to New Jersey, see what we're doing at the state level. And then from there, dive deeper within New Jersey and see how we can impact our sustainable future, what kind of solutions that can be brought in. Give you a couple of examples, things that we have done in the state in a public-private partnership with some of the stakeholders who are present today. And I'll end my talk with, again, kind of bring the focus down to a new topic that happens to be energy storage. That's a new initiative, that's a new technology, that's a new sector, and see how energy storage is impacting smart cities and impacting climate change solutions. So I'm sure most of you are familiar or have come across the water, energy, food nexus, and it's obvious to anyone that it takes a lot of energy for food production, or it takes a lot of energy for water production or conveyance. And at a global level, the numbers are serious. When I say serious, meaning they are of a significant risk to our livelihood. At the rate at which we're consuming water or energy or food, frankly, we need multiple Earths to supply our needs, which obviously we can't. If we, for example, if we follow the US standard of living, we need 5 Earths today to support our lifestyle. So clearly, as the rest of the world is developing, is adopting the Western lifestyle, we have to come up with sustainable solutions. And if you look at the forecast, whether by the UN or other agencies, you'll see that for energy, water, and food, there's a projection for a significant increase. And if you take into consideration that one impacts the other, we have to break that cycle. So what we need to do, we need to reduce the consumption, be more efficient, but also find a way to break that interdependency. That nexus needs to be reduced. I have some statistics here and data, which I can't see on the screen, but I probably can see it better there. With an increase in energy, water, and food, and as I said, increasing one of them is going to impact the other one. What methods, what processes, what methodologies, what business models can be brought forward to break that interdependency? I kind of invite you to actually start thinking about that, because I'm going to share with you some examples, but in each of your research or work area, there are many other examples of how we can break that interdependency. I happen to spend a lot of time in the energy sector, specifically in the electricity sector. This slide shows us the amount of water that is used to produce what we call a megawatt hour. It's a unit of energy. It's a kilowatt hour times 1,000. That's the amount of water used in various technologies today to produce a megawatt hour. So we use about 1,000 gallons to produce a megawatt hour if you're using coal technology. So coal is not only bad from a greenhouse gas emission perspective, but it's really bad from a water consumption perspective. And what we see here, if we move from coal to nuclear to natural gas and eventually something like solar or wind, we reduce the water consumption, but we are also helping the challenge of climate change. This is actually one of the rare moments where in society we get to have multiple benefits by making a transition from one source to the other. Typically, if you go from one to the other, something else gets worse. We happen to be lucky here that we can get to a cleaner environment, but less dependency on the water supply and stressing of the water supply. This is a busy flow, but it has an interesting statistic. This is a US flow of water consumption and water withdrawal. And we mentioned earlier that it takes a lot of water to produce electricity in the US, the way we produce our energy. And if you look at fresh surface water and saline surface water, which are the largest water withdrawals in the US, kind of combining the two is fairly large. And you look at the percentage of the surface water that's used for thermoelectric cooling, that's the water used for cooling power plants. You'll actually find that over 60% of the water that's drawn from lakes, from rivers, from the ocean, over 60% of that is used to cool power plants. That's a massive number. It's far more than agriculture. And it just puts things in perspective. Water happens to be a scarce resource. It's a very scarce resource. We can spend an hour or two just talking about stress of water, the quality of water, the availability of water, the risks associated with the water supply. And about 5 years ago, back in 2004, 2005, California was going through major water shortages. And at the time, I happened to be at a company called NRG, which is one of the largest power producers in the country. And so with being a large consumer of water, and people didn't have enough water for drinking, didn't have enough water for agriculture, if you are a company that's consuming the bulk of that water, you can see the stress not just to the environment, but to your own business model. And again, that's because of the nexus between the water and the energy sectors. So it takes a lot of water to produce electricity, but at the same time, it takes a lot of energy to clean water, to produce water, to transport water from one area to the other. And that's the definition of a nexus. Each one impacts the other one in a positive correlation. So back in 2012, in the US, over 12% of our energy supply was used for the water sector. That's frankly one of the largest sectors for energy consumption. And this is at an energy level. These are the quads. The quadrillion is 10 to the 15 watt hours. And there's another statistic that almost half of that, about 6% of the electricity consumption is used for pumping water around, whether clean water or wastewater. Now, if you go to a country like, let's say Saudi Arabia, where they desalinate water for most of their consumption, these numbers are much higher. Yet they're in a desert, and most of their energy is used for water desalination and pumping. That dependency, that nexus, is very serious. It's a matter of national security for many countries out there. There's actually a map, I could have included that here, that shows what's called armed conflict around the world over water rights. People go to war over water. People kill each other. But what's most surprising is that that map includes the United States. So every year, there are people in the US who fight over water and kill each other, which you never think is the case. So now we looked at some of the statistics at a global level. We see some of the numbers in the interdependency at the national level. What if we look at New Jersey? What's happening in New Jersey? Luckily, we happen to be in a state where society is very progressive. We did extremely well when it comes to solar energy. We have people with us today, and my friend Tom, who's been in the solar industry for 20 years or so, one of the early pioneers in the space. New Jersey actually ranked number 2 in the US for some time, and I think now we're what, number 6 or 7? Around there. But for a small state, we are very progressive. We are pro-environment, pro-clean energy, clean technology, and that's great for students, that's great for people who want to start their career in the clean tech sector, as compared to being in an environment where the jobs are associated with coal, either mining or electricity generation. So we happen to be in a good space between New York, with New Jersey. We're actually, it's a bright future for anyone who is interested in clean technology. So New Jersey has, in the law and in policy, several targets that are really exciting. The most exciting one is that by 2050, we're targeting 100% of clean energy supply in the state. That is a big goal, that's a bold goal. And frankly, to get there, we know some of the solutions, but many of the solutions remain to be invented. And you have to look at yourself, look at your colleagues. You guys need to come up with those solutions. We have the target there, but we still don't have the solution. We know what the next immediate steps look like, but it really needs all of you to come together to think outside the box, to work in team settings, to help the state get to 100% clean energy by 2050. Obviously, when you look at today's solutions, solar, wind happen to be some of the mega trends that are adopted to help us get there. We also know, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, we know that renewable energy is intermittent. We know that we don't have solar energy at night, so energy storage is another key component of the state policy to help us get to 100% clean energy. And sometimes you need to give a specific target for a subsector. We call that an RPS or an RES, a renewable energy standard, meaning you put in policy, say, okay, I want so much wind generation and so much of solar generation to jumpstart that sector, and then hopefully beyond that point, it can compete on its own and help get to the overall targets that we have. Okay, so how do we go from looking at a statewide goal of 100% clean energy, and we want to arrive at what can be done for urban settings and smart cities? Now, why do smart cities, or why do cities or urban areas matter? Globally, over 50% of the world's population live at cities or in cities. And that number is actually higher in a state like New Jersey. We have about 560 municipalities in New Jersey. We are the most densely populated state in the country. Frankly, New Jersey sometimes feels like just one big sprawling city. If you fly over New Jersey, you look at Google Maps, almost you hardly go a mile without someone that lives there. So think about it as a massive city. And with such a large population in urban settings, we can see that's a big sector, that's an impactful sector, that's a worthy cause of studying it, researching it, getting a job, having a career in that space. But not only the population is mostly in urban cities, we consume a lot of energy as well, lifestyle. And because of the nexus that we showed earlier, the strong connection between energy generation and water and other sources, you can see that we're also responsible for a disproportionate percentage of CO2 emissions and other greenhouse gas emissions. So urban settings today have a large percentage in terms of the contribution towards climate change, and we have a larger number of problems, a larger number of challenges to be addressed. So how do you go from there to what we call smart cities? Frankly, there's probably 100 ways of contributing, either solutions or technologies or other methods, for helping urban areas become smart. This is an eye chart with a lot of text there, but I found it to always be a good place to recognize how someone attempted to define what smart means. About 15 years ago, this is from back in 2007, the Department of Energy had multiple initiatives around smart grid. Because when you think about smart cities, probably one of the most obvious ways, okay, what does smart mean? And some people took offense to the term, some people liked it. People said smart grid, some people said, oh, wait a minute, so my grid is not smart, my company's, there was a debate, there was a public debate about what smart means. Even, I recall GE had a TV ad, if you remember, about smart cities and what that means. The federal government had a lot of funding for research and projects around smart cities. So this is on Wikipedia. This is from the Department of Energy. And I tried to highlight some of the terms. So smart, embedded in what a smart grid or smart water system or smart mobility, embedded in there is communication. And bidirectional communication. It's not a broadcast, it's a bidirectional communication. Embedded in there is command and control. So not just a flow of information that goes back and forth. And again, you can fill in the blanks. You can put water, you can put electricity, you can put food, you can put transportation. All of those contribute to smart cities. I'm giving you an example here of smart grid, frankly, because we happen to do some projects, and I'll share with you the examples of those projects. So there's digital information and controls. And it's amazing that how inefficient our lifestyle is today. You see efficiency brought forward by shared ride services, the Uber, the Lyft. You see shared assets like Airbnb and the likes. And that concept can be extended to many other sectors in life where we can use and reuse our precious assets. And the reuse concept is one of the key components in sustainability. Think about anything that's sustainable, you'll find that dual use and triple use is an integral part of that definition. And so we have architects with us today. You can think about, you see it today where banks are becoming cafes. And that's a smart thing. Why should a bank just be a bank and another building with its own emissions and heat and water just be for another function? Why can't we combine all those functions in a smart way with different times, different functions, to be of multi-use? So the definitions extend, and I invite you to go and look it up. Again, you can find this on the smart grid on Wikipedia. And you'll see dynamic optimization. That's associated with control. And I'll talk a little bit more about a system that's not optimized and how inefficient and expensive it is. I'm not going to go through the list, but I'm fairly confident that regardless of what your area of study and focus and research is, you'll find something within a smart grid or smart city that applies to your work. So, some of us here, about 15 years ago, we came together and said, okay, the DOE, this is around that time, 2007. So the DOE is pushing forward, the investors, policymakers want smart cities, want smart solutions. And at the time, 2007, I had just founded a company at the time called Petra Solar. Today it's called Petra Petrosystems, and we have Marcelo from Petrosystems with us today. And we said, okay, what can we do together in New Jersey in a public-private partnership where we can translate what the DOE is doing, we can translate what public policy is calling for into practical solutions. And so some of you might have noticed solar panels on poles throughout New Jersey. You might see them around campus. That is a project that was born out of that public-private partnership where we, as a young company in New Jersey, sat down with policymakers, with the governor's team at the time, sat down with the legislator. We introduced new laws. We worked with the commission. We worked, at the time, our primary partner was PSE&G, which I know PSE&G is the lead utility in New Jersey. And I think one of the strongest business partners of NJIT as well. I know many of the great minds of PSE&G have graduated from NJIT. That's a strategic relationship that I invite you to build on. It's a great relationship. And so we came together and said, okay, what can be done? We're in an urban setting, practically. Land is precious in New Jersey. We want to build megawatts and megawatts of solar. If we go out there and chop down trees and spend extra money to extend transmission, distribution infrastructure, that's expensive. So we came together and developed a solution of leveraging existing infrastructure. These poles that are managed by the utility are effectively paid for by the ratepayers, people who pay their electricity bill. And with the progressive leadership at PSE&G, along with progressive leadership at Trenton, private sector participation, we developed what we call smart solar, which is what you see these solar panels on poles. They're not just solar systems, there's built-in communication systems. There is, you can see it here, if you look at the back of each one of them, you'll see a box that looks like this with an antenna. That box takes the DC power from the panel and turns it into AC that gets injected into the wire lines. So it's a power plant sitting on the grid. But each and every one of them has a radio inside, a smart grid radio. So they talk to each other and they create a backbone of the communications infrastructure. And that is available and performs many functions, like monitoring the grid. So when Hurricane Sandy came through, we were able to see exactly where the outages were. And when a connection is restored, you can tell if the voltage is correct, if the phase is correct. So it gives you insight. And that communication infrastructure can also be leveraged for many other things. It can be used for lighting control, it can be used for many functions that allow a city or community or neighborhood to be smart. Okay? And I'm happy to answer any questions about that project. This is actually an image from the day that the commission approved the project. This is in Secaucus. And this image, I believe, was on the next day on the cover of Wall Street Journal. So the stakeholders won many awards for that project, including the Edison Award, which is the most prestigious award in the electric utility sector. Okay, so now we talked about the Nexus, we talked about how clean energy can help break that connection between water, for example, and energy. And you see, if you use less water, you need less energy. Use less water, you have more water available for food. That's a good thing. So where does energy storage come into this? And we just said earlier, and it's obvious, that energy storage helps with renewable integration. Because it's intermittent and you don't have it in what we call a firm way. You can't call upon a solar panel to give you power. Power is there, and energy is there when the sun is out or the wind is blowing. I have a slide that talks about infrastructure, but let me skip and talk about electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are batteries on wheels in a way. And many people immediately think, well, we have batteries in cars, so we have solved the energy storage problem. But if you dig a little bit deeper into that, you'll actually find that electric vehicles require more storage on the grid. Why is that? Well, an electric vehicle at the end of the year, at the end of the day, or the end of the month, is a net load. You consumed electricity for mobility. It did not produce electricity. Now, it happened to be a device that can give you back some for a period of time, but as a net device, it is consuming electricity at the end of the year. And that's a good thing, by the way, because now you can centralize or you can pick and choose your electricity generation to be cleaner. So when, let's say, a number of people have electric vehicles in a neighborhood, the grid is stressed. And an electric vehicle can be the equivalent of adding anywhere between 3 to 5 homes. So if the grid cannot supply that demand, having a localized energy storage system in that neighborhood can charge all night, for example, and provide that supply when electric vehicles call for it. And that's one of the mega trends today driving a need for energy storage. But when we talk about the grid, the electric grid along the generation and so on, it is the most expensive machine we have ever built. It's a machine in the US that cost trillions of dollars. 10 years ago, I saw an estimate of $3 trillion associated with the electric grid. That includes generation. So we're talking about the most expensive machine we ever built, that on the average is about 41% utilized. And why is that? If you look at any commodity supply system, you'll see that you have storage in the system that helps you balance supply and demand and lower the average cost. You see it for sure in the oil supply. And there's about 12% of storage that helps you mitigate spikes and lowers the cost on the average. But in the electricity delivery system is what we refer to just-in-time machine or system. This very complex and sophisticated system has to deliver you electrons when you need them. When you flip the switch, you expect the electrons to show up. Those electrons are not stored in the form of electrons in the grid. They might be stored in the form of fuel, coal, gas, something else. But they're not stored in the form of electricity that they can show up instantaneously. So because of that, the grid has been built to supply our need exactly when we need it. And that led to that inefficient utilization, as I said, about 40%, 41%, which means we can deliver two and a half times the energy with the same system if we balance supply and demand. And energy storage is a key solution, a key tool in helping balance our grid. It's like building a highway system to New York City to meet rush hour so no one slows down as they go into New York City. Makes no sense, but that's how the electricity systems go today. Energy storage, and I'm not going to go through the details, has almost 20 applications on the grid. We mentioned 2 or 3, but there are many others associated with the grid. And the energy storage market is growing rapidly. So from a career perspective, if you're planning your research, if you're looking at jobs, the energy storage market is growing in a rapid fashion. I'm going to show you a statistic here. Just in New Jersey and New York, those 2 states, given what we have as a mandate in the law, those 2 states, New York and New Jersey, make up a $10 billion market for energy storage between now and 2030. And it's an industry that is just starting. A lot of talent, a lot of jobs will be created in that space. We're working, we have a company called Power Edison, and we're working on energy storage solutions. Again, similar to what we have done 15 years ago or 13 years ago in solar, by bringing smart solutions with energy storage. And one of the solutions we found that the need on the grid for energy storage is actually dynamic. It's not, for example, in this building, 365 days a year, every day of the year, every day, you'll find that New York City, for example, needs energy storage in the summer. You'll find that up by ski resorts in New Jersey, in the Northwest, you need energy storage in the wintertime when the grid is challenged and stressed. You'll find in Florida, for example, during the hurricane season, the need for energy storage is during the hurricane season. So instead of building expensive energy storage systems that are stationary or end up being stranded, mobility, engineering the solution to be mobile, and following where the need is a kind of creative way or smart way or economic way of addressing the need. We've created with data science and looking at the need in the US, and Yazan here in the audience, he's responsible for creating this heat map. We can anticipate when an energy storage system is needed, in which geography, what's the economic value associated with that. So anyone who's doing research in data sciences and analytics, again, we mentioned earlier, our lifestyle is very efficient, and whether we're looking at mobility, but at the same time, looking at the grid needs when it comes to energy storage, it's a space that's looking for a lot of innovative solutions. We even filed for a patent for a storage system that moves autonomously from one location to the other to plug in based on this heat map. So this is the last slide. How do we bring this together for the students? How do we bring this together for research? What are the areas that can help smart cities become smarter and become a reality? Frankly, this is just a subset of the skill sets, of the areas that you can build expertise in. Engineering is a broad term, whether it's environmental, civil, mechanical, electrical, chemical. That has a major role in building smart cities. Data science, like I showed you in the previous slide, there's a lot when it comes to data science and analytics. And luckily, there's a lot of raw data out there that can be analyzed, and we come up with business models and business solutions. But that innovation doesn't stop in the lab. It's not just technical. In my humble experience, I found that sometimes innovation on the policy side, frankly, is even more important than the technical. We do have today a lot of solutions, technical solutions, but policy stands in the way. And why is policy standing in the way? Because you're interacting with people. It's human behavior. It's not ones and zeros. It's not abstract. People behavior tends to be more challenging when you have to come up with solutions and uniform kind of mandates for people. That's tough, especially in a democratic society where you have to respect the minority opinion. That's true politically, but that's also true from a technical solutions. And we have people from the finance world, like John here, who I looked at a number once, which was very interesting. If you look at what's called a solar PPA, meaning the cost you pay when you contract for solar energy, about a third is attributed to the cost of the equipment. About a third is attributed to the labor associated with the installation and maintenance. But also about a third is attributed to the cost of financing that system. So many people take financing as an afterthought, but it actually has an equal weight to lowering the cost of solar panels or lowering the cost of labor, and that is the cost of financing. So coming up with creative solutions, financial engineering, and luckily we happen to be in a location close to New York City where there's amazing talent when it comes to capital sources and financial engineering. So thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
So I noticed that when you were talking about the water consumption per kind of system, research area, you had the nuclear power plants having quite a high water consumption, over kind of $1 those cases, we tend to lump nuclear power in with more clean sources of energy.
I'm sorry, what's the source?
So, the nuclear power.
Yes.
So we tend to lump nuclear power in with cleaner sources of energy.
Yes.
By its, I guess, power density that it generates in terms of the size of it, kind of.
By the emissions.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how does the solar energy kind of, the fact that it tends to be less dense per area, where you can't have like one solar panel reactor and it will produce enough? It's, I'm trying to word it in a way like, how do the benefits of the fact that not only does it require less water, but it does take up more room, how do we kind of work around that?
That's a good question. So yes, solar energy does have very low density. You need large acreage, large space to produce the same energy as, say, a nuclear plant. And the point you raise is a point that's being debated and has been debated in Trenton about, is nuclear energy clean or not? Should it be included in the 100% target or should it not be? And I think where people settle today is that we need nuclear plants as a transition. Keep them alive, keep them running, because they do help with greenhouse gas emissions, until we have these new solutions that many of you are going to invent for us. So, now when it comes to the density, you're right. And that's why New Jersey, just like in any smart strategy, you want to leverage your strength. And New Jersey has fantastic offshore resource when it comes to wind energy. And you saw that we have a mandate for offshore wind energy. We have a Jersey Shore, but if you go out and look at it, we have a fantastic resource. So that's, instead of utilizing land, we can be utilizing wind energy offshore. But then if you think about rooftops, we have a lot of rooftops that can be utilized. But there's still, even with all the energy storage, the solar energy we have in New Jersey, there's so much room for innovation. A lot of surfaces that don't have solar on them yet.
I have a question. I know that nuclear energy is important and is seen as a way to transition into a more sustainable source of energy, but what about the cost of nuclear energy? Because it is more expensive to build, and you know, it takes so much care to run a nuclear plant properly, and then once we're done with it, it takes a lot more money for it to be disassembled in a proper way.
That is true. I think what you'll see, and I'll speak for New Jersey, what you'll see that in New Jersey, we are not building any new nuclear plants. What we have is we have a number of nuclear plants in the state that are nearing their end of life, and they're being managed in a transitional phase as they get decommissioned with new energy sources that come in. The challenge is, if we shut them down today, we would have to use fossil-based systems which will increase the greenhouse gas emissions. But I agree, I mean, nuclear energy has a very large capital cost. That's why you don't see many people building nuclear plants. And if you research it, you'll see, I believe, Southern Company in the Southeast US been trying to build a nuclear plant, and the cost keeps going up and up and up. And hardly anyone is building what we call merchant nuclear plants. They're building it based on guaranteed payments from the ratepayers. So you are not going to see, to my knowledge, anyone proposing building any new nuclear plants in New Jersey.
Shihab, thank you for this very nice talk. So New Jersey has very aggressive plans to move to renewable energy. So does many states. You know, coming next year, if there's a change in Washington, the whole U.S. and many other countries. My question to you is, if we say that by 2050 all these countries and states are going to have this transition, can the industry to make batteries and solar panels and wind grow at a sufficient rate to meet the huge demand that's coming?
That's a good question. And for those who don't know, Dr. Illy, he's a professor at Princeton University, and I admire his work there. That's a good question. Do we have the scale? Should we have a change in Washington where we're behind clean solutions, where we are taking a leadership position at the global level for ourselves and beyond for clean energy solutions? Is the scale there? You know, I know a lot of people, for example, criticize China as China was building up massive factories for solar energy and for wind energy. Personally, I like that because someone took it upon themselves to build large scale that took the cost. Solar panels, when I got in the industry, were being sold at about $6 a watt. Today, you can buy solar panels, the panel itself, at anywhere between 30 to 40 cents a watt. And I can tell you that number would not have been possible if China did not enter the supply chain. So I believe the answer is yes. If we look at financial incentives, the industry is very creative at scaling up. You see the terms of gigafactories on the automotive side, Tesla and others. I visited gigafactories in South Korea and I see they can build up 20 in a year. It really, surprisingly, it doesn't take much money to build a gigafactory for batteries. It's less than $50 million to build a gigafactory. That's not a lot of money. Some buildings cost $50 million. And obviously we need a more sustainable supply for solar panels in terms of the raw materials, the metals, and so on. But lithium, for example, is abundant. It's in seawater. The metals happen to be the cathode, is where it's more precious. So to answer your question, yeah, I think the industry can come up with the scale required. It is a massive scale, but it's a fantastic investment opportunity. I don't see it as a burden. I see it as, if we in the US did not adopt solutions for climate change, guess what? Other countries would, and they are. And so fast forward 2 years or 5 years, our automotive industry will be behind, our solar industry will be behind, our water industry will be behind. I would rather be at the forefront. And we have the innovation, we have the know-how, we have the intellectual horsepower to be at the forefront. It's a great challenge to tackle. So even from a business competitiveness, we want to be in the game.
So a lot of the solutions that you mentioned seem to rely on some degree of decentralization in one way or the other. And there seems to be many challenges to that. Some of them are kind of the inertia of existing organizations, whether it's industry organizations or whether it's existing policy. How do you see kind of a disruptive industry or company or group actually challenging kind of existing inertia? And do you see kind of a tension between the benefits of decentralization versus kind of the existing systems that frame centralized energy production, regulation, et cetera? And speaking of regulation, how do you regulate a decentralized system? Many questions, but.
Thank you, Ahmad. And for those of you who don't know Ahmad, I will talk to him after this. He's an architect, he's an MIT grad, and he's working with creative solutions. He's also on the board of Resilient Redwood, which is an area that's vulnerable to rising seawater level, and participant in a grassroots organization looking for solutions. This is the third topic here that I mentioned earlier on the policy side. In my personal experience, that is actually much, much more difficult than inventing a technical solution. I don't have a simple answer, but I know what worked for us in the past is a public-private partnership. And when you talk about energy, you talk about food, and we talk about water, by definition, you're engaging the politicians. By definition, you're engaging policymakers. Because of the monopoly system implied and existing there. We can't wake up tomorrow and say, I want to run a new wire to this building, because PSE&G has that wire running here. And there's a business model between PSE&G and the commission and the ratepayers, and the rate advocate, and the governor's team that balances interests for the common good. And so how do you influence new models? Everyone, in my experience, everyone actually is very positive, they want to work together, but you need to create a solution that attends to the interests of the public, of the utility companies, to the ratepayers, to the taxpayers. So policy innovation tends to be overlooked. And when you look at the time constant associated with policy implementation, it is the longest. And it can take 10 years just to implement a policy change. And it's very difficult. And so you can see that at the national level today with all politics. I mean, we are more polarized than ever, especially when it comes to solutions that you would think are just common sense. But we're not behind those common sense solutions. So it is a reflection of how we as a society attend to solving problems. And again, I'm not the expert. We've implemented public-private partnerships. We found everyone was great, but I encourage each and every one of you to look at the policy side.
In order to meet the aggressive RES standards in New Jersey, we're gonna have to use a lot of the current technology, including solar panels, but a lot of those designs have heavy rare earth elements in them that, when mined, use a lot of resources and energy. So how do you square the mining costs, including water and energy, with the idea that solar is 100% clean and 100% zero emissions?
Yeah, so I would say about 15, 20 years ago, when we looked at what's called the payback, the energy payback formula for a solar panel, the energy that went into making a solar panel to the energy that you get over the lifetime, it was negative or was below 1. Meaning we took a lot more energy to make a solar panel than the energy we got back. And effectively, we were taking the problem from one location and concentrating it in another place where the manufacturing and the mining is happening. That ratio actually is positive today, which means the energy that goes into making a solar panel is less than the energy that solar panel is going to get back to us. Why? Because there's been significant improvement in efficiency, not just conversion efficiency, but manufacturing efficiency, transportation, packaging, you name it, it's lighter, and the use of rare earths is true. I don't see it to be at the scale today where it outweighs the benefits, okay? Now, having said that, if you look in the battery space, if you look at the lead acid battery space, we recycle over 95% of the lead in lead acid batteries. Tesla, to my knowledge, is also going to recycle the batteries as they come back from their cars. So lifetime management through recycling. So we might have no choice but to extract rare earths from Earth to produce the products, but recycling and second life, those are critical areas to keep that same element put to use and repurpose over and over. And that's frankly why we doubled down 4 years ago on mobile energy storage, because we noticed that that system can work 4 times a year in different locations with the same battery, instead of having 4 batteries at different locations.
Can I return to the question around approaching cities? So it seemed like you had 2 slides. One was the mobile energy storage, and the other was the solar streetlights. Can you give maybe one lesson per example of engaging a city? What did you learn about engaging a city, and what went wrong and what went well, and what would you do kind of differently? Because it's about that inertia and engaging a city that can make change. How do you get them to pilot something, do something differently than they've done in the past?
Sure. I should say that for 1 or 2 or 10 successful projects we had, we probably had 50 that were not successful. I do recall at some point in time we had 100 pilots around the country, not 1 or 2, not 10, 100 relationships. If you actually go to Florida, you find solar panels on poles there. If you go to LA, if you go to Canada, if you go to Texas, if you go to South Jersey, outside of PSE&Gs. And not every attempt succeeded. It wasn't because the economics were not in place. It wasn't because the technology was any different. It's the same. It was because of policy. I do remember, I used to go to what's called the EEI, the Edison Electric Institute. It's the association representing the electric utilities, about 300 of them. They would have an annual meeting. And before 2010, we had a national energy policy. People are saying we're going to get to 20% RPS, renewable portfolio standard for renewable energy. Every CEO would present 2 or 3 slides how to get to that. We had a change in Congress in 2010. All those slides disappeared. Again, because we didn't have leadership when it comes to clean energy. And so policy was the most painful. Now, in terms of specific examples, we engaged with the largest utility in the country, which is the LADWP for Los Angeles. It happens to be a publicly owned utility as compared to, say, Power Edison or PSEG, which is an investor-owned utility. And the challenge there was financing was a big one. How can you finance a system where the utility doesn't necessarily have the credit to pay for that? That was a specific challenge. In other locations, we had constituents who said, I don't want to see solar in my jurisdiction, in my service area, so it was a political thing. No solar, no green solutions. And as I said, it wasn't for lack of technical solutions. The policy, sometimes the financing, was frankly a bigger hurdle that we could have accomplished on our own. We just can't be everything to everyone. Again, if I were to look back, the biggest or the most painful lessons were those associated with policy and the pace. And you can go out of business waiting for a policy change. It took us, I think, 4 years to make a change to some of the codes and standards, the IEEE standards. And IEEE is headquartered in New Jersey, Piscataway. We hosted meetings. We wanted to accelerate the adoption of new standards. 4 years. Which you would think can be done very quickly now. And you'd be amazed to who shows up with a veto power, so you can't do it.
Thanks, this was a very illuminating talk. It's always interesting to see the solar panels. They seem to be very two-dimensional and perhaps explaining why they're taking a lot of space. We do have a nature, so to speak, trees that are able to harvest photons in 3 dimensions from a volume perspective. I'm just wondering, we've seen a lot of innovations in solar panels in terms of being a little bit more efficient, light and so forth, but the geometry seems to be the same. Why is that?
So there are what's called bifacial panels that capture the photons from the front and the back. They are utilized in some areas. Some people, there was a company that put solar panels on rooftops, painted the rooftop white, almost as reflective as it can be, so reflection can be captured. It's honestly an engineering and a techno-economic optimization. If it is, given the increased costs, more efficient, specifically, trackers is one way of taking a panel to be moving into 2 different, the single axis trackers and the dual axis trackers. Single axis, depending on the application, depending where you are, from how far you're from the equator, trackers can be meaningful and people implement them or not. If you go with a dual axis tracker, now you have perfect alignment and you can use a lot more energy efficient systems. It's at the end of the day is an optimization, engineering optimization. And frankly, that optimization changes every 5 years. So I know trackers have a good positive payback, single axis trackers for systems that are utility scale out in a farm in the desert, but not necessarily true on a rooftop.
Okay, let me, yeah, question. Yes, this is definitely has been illuminating. We would like to thank you for attending, and definitely want to thank our keynote speaker for this wonderful talk.